On the southern coast of Italy, in a small fishing village called Acciaroli, researchers made a discovery that stopped them mid-sentence. In 2016, a joint team from the University of California, San Diego and Sapienza University of Rome went to study the village's unusual population. Roughly 1 in 10 residents of Acciaroli is over the age of 100. That alone was worth the trip. But it was what they didn't find that changed the direction of the research entirely. Almost none of them had dementia. Not reduced dementia, not managed dementia. An absence of it in a population of centenarians that had no clear medical explanation. Most of the Western world has quietly accepted a particular story about the aging brain. The story goes like this. Cognitive decline is a built-in feature of getting older. Memory softens. Attention narrows. The brain, like the body, simply wears out. This is treated not as a theory, but as a fact. Something you prepare for, not something you prevent. The Lancet Commission on Dementia Prevention published a report in 2020 estimating that up to 40% of dementia cases worldwide are potentially preventable through modifiable lifestyle factors. 40%. That figure does not make the evening news as often as it should. It suggests that what most people are treating as biology is, in significant part, behavior. The people of Acciaroli were not taking supplements. They were not following a protocol. They were doing what their grandparents had done, and their grandparents before them. Two of those things, now studied carefully by neuroscientists, turn out to have a direct and measurable effect on the brain. The first is something researchers call the daily foraging walk. Every morning, for generations, the older residents of Acciaroli and the surrounding Cilento Hills have walked out into the surrounding terrain to gather fresh herbs. The land is uneven. There are no paved paths. The ground shifts. Loose stone, root, slope, gradient. This is not a stroll. The body is required to make constant micro-adjustments in balance, and the brain is required to do something more specific. To gather wild herbs, you must know where you are. You must navigate by landmark, by memory of previous walks, by the relationship between one hillside and another. You must identify which plant is which. Rosemary from lavender, sage from oregano, from the shape of the leaf, the texture, the smell. You're performing, without knowing it, a form of active spatial reasoning that reaches directly into the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the brain's center of navigation and episodic memory. It is also the first region affected by Alzheimer's disease. In 2014, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded for the discovery of the brain's internal positioning system, the place cells and grid cells that live in and around the hippocampus and allow the brain to construct a map of the world. These cells are not passive. They are strengthened by use, by novelty, by the requirement to navigate environments that do not stay the same. Walking on a treadmill does not do this. Walking the same paved route every morning does not do this either. What builds what neuroscientists at Columbia University describe as cognitive reserve, the brain's functional resilience against damage, is the requirement to think spatially, continuously, in an environment that demands active attention. The foraging walk, done daily across a lifetime, is essentially a daily workout for the hippocampus. Not a metaphorical workout, a measurable one. But what was gathered on those walks matters just as much as the walk itself. The herb most associated with Acciaroli's centenarians, observed by researchers in their cooking, on their windowsills, woven into nearly every meal, is rosemary. Fresh rosemary, used in quantities that would seem excessive to most Western kitchens. And in that detail lies the second mechanism. Rosemary, along with sage, contains a compound called rosmarinic acid. Rosmarinic acid is a polyphenol, a plant molecule that the body handles in a specific and significant way. Unlike many plant compounds that are metabolized in the gut before reaching the bloodstream, rosmarinic acid crosses the blood-brain barrier. It enters the brain itself. Once there, two things happen. First, rosmarinic acid reduces neuroinflammation by suppressing the activation of microglia, the brain's immune cells, which, when chronically overactivated, contribute to the destruction of neurons. Second, and more specifically, studies including research published in the Journal of Neurochemistry have demonstrated that rosmarinic acid inhibits the aggregation of amyloid beta proteins, the plaques that accumulate in the brains of Alzheimer's patients and are understood to disrupt neural communication over time. The people of Acciaroli were not medicating themselves. They were cooking. The rosmarinic acid arrived quietly, daily, in olive oil, in lamb, in bread, in the small ceramic dishes of herbs sitting on every kitchen table. The brain received its anti-inflammatory signal not from a clinic, but from lunch. Now consider what this means for your own daily life. Not as a dramatic reinvention, but as a set of small, specific adjustments that the science supports. Walk without your phone's navigation. Choose a route that is unfamiliar, or at minimum, one that requires you to notice your surroundings. A park with varied terrain, a hill, a path you don't have memorized. The goal is not fitness. The goal is to ask your hippocampus to work. 15 minutes of genuinely attentive, navigated walking carries a different biological signal than the same distance covered on autopilot. Grow rosemary, not in a garden necessarily. A pot on a windowsill is sufficient. Rosemary is drought-resistant and almost aggressively easy to keep alive. Use it fresh, not dried. The concentration of rosmarinic acid in fresh rosemary is measurably higher than in the dried herb. Add it to eggs, to roasted vegetables, to olive oil you heat gently and pour over bread. Add sage in the same way. Sage contains rosmarinic acid in even higher concentrations than rosemary, and it has been studied specifically for its effects on acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter most depleted in Alzheimer's disease. The dose that appears in the research is not a supplement dose. It is a culinary dose. A tablespoon of fresh rosemary, used several times a week across years, is what the data reflects. Not a capsule, a habit. What strikes you, sitting with all of this, is how long these habits existed before science arrived to explain them. The people of Acciaroli were not waiting for a Journal of Neurochemistry paper. They were doing what their environment and their culture had always asked of them: walking the same hills, gathering the same herbs, eating the same meals. The protection was already there, embedded in the ordinary texture of their days. That is what the research keeps finding, in village after village along the Mediterranean coast. The habits that protect the brain are not special. They are not optimized. They are simply old and consistent, and deeply woven into how a life is lived. Next week, we look at another finding from the centenarian research, specifically what the science has found about how the Mediterranean relationship with time itself, the pace at which the day unfolds, alters the body's hormonal environment in ways that accumulate across decades. It is one of the least discussed mechanisms in longevity research and one of the most measurable. This video is for educational purposes only. Always consult your healthcare provider